again, the system is the villain here, and everything about it is made to keep you from pushing back, from asking questions. And if you get involved in any way, all of a sudden, you are a potential target. So like it forces you to not have friends, to not have allies, and that's just like it's a really cool construct for this dystopian story, but it's also just like a really interesting look at authoritarian politics and how how people are controlled by their governments when things get turned up to an extreme like this.
Welcome, friends, to episode 321 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss the final 5 episodes in season 1 of Graham Yost's 2023 series, Silo. All right, Luke, we've now finished the show Silo. This is something that I had seen previously and you hadn't, but now we're caught up. We know the same amount of information about this series, and you can understand how I've had these lingering questions. And what's cool is that we're going to come back next week and do the second half of the book, actually, which covers beyond season 1 of the show.
It seems, at least. We don't know. We haven't read it.
Yeah, very true. But come back next week for that.
Yeah.
This week we're gonna kind of finish up the show. What did you think, Luke?
So I'm excited to finally be able to like speculate with you, because I've been like holding off doing a lot of that because I know you know answers, and so it's kind of weird to speculate with someone who might know the answers to some of the stuff. I had a great time with the back half of this show, this first season. I felt like it really picked up steam in a way. It built on itself. My wife and I were watching it together, and we found that we just kept wanting to watch the next episode. Like, it was really ramping, especially towards the end. Like, we flew through them. Maybe
some of those cliffhangers really had you going, right? 'Cause
yeah.
You noted in the first half that like they had these very obvious cliffhangers, but I think it's almost like a calling card of the show at this point.
Yeah.
Like they almost always leave you on like a crazy cliffhanger. You're like, what the fuck?
A lot of shows that are, thrilling do that. I remain still skeptical about some of the more artificial ones, but a lot of the ones here in the back half of this season were really good and definitely helped pull me into the next episode. I really found an admiration for this entire project. That I think just like it was there, but it just went up a notch as we watched, because I really started to appreciate what kind of story it is. Really, this is a story about people trying to rebel and like live a life of freedom within an oppressive society and construct. And the entire, yes, there are villains in this show, but the real villain is the system. And I love that, right? Like the system is the villain, and it is the people who are leveraging it, sure, but you get the sense that any one of them could easily be replaced, and as long as the system is still in place, that's still going to happen, right? The pact exemplified by. And I love that we see all kinds of different people trying to figure out a way to live in this system. And speaking of, Billings was a character that I was, pretty skeptical about, didn't know if I liked early on in the show. And this back half of the season, I fell in love with this character. I thought he was great. And, cool. I really got a sense for he wants to follow the rules. He's won all these contests, memorizing the pact. But it's just because he's kind of like a goody two shoes, but he's also sort of making up for the fact that he has the syndrome, which he's been hiding. And in order to mask that, I think he's trying to really excel at following the rules, because he's breaking the rules by doing the job he's doing.
One of the things I love about that character, and sort of you're talking about this show as a whole is kind of talking about rebelling against the system, but one of the things that really speaks to me is at least question the status quo, question what's going on. And this is a character that, like you said, is the absolute rule follower, but is smart enough and is savvy enough and maybe is engaged enough by what Juliette is doing to kind of some of that's rubbing off on him. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, on his own, is open to interpreting what's going on and trying to figure out his own sort of way through this whole mystery. There's a lot of characters maybe in positions of power that if they ask why and for what reasons, and we can talk about the end, because I think the end leaves us with a sort of note of well, who is really in the right at this point?
I mean, nobody other than, people who are asking questions, I think. I like to see that these sort of these alliances form between unlikely people. And, Billings is basically a Boy Scout. And it's cool to see him get on board with this somewhat towards the end, even though, I don't know, it's like he doesn't do a ton to affect the plot at the end, but maybe just enough. I don't know. We're gonna have to go through it. I'm gonna be excited to talk on each of these episodes.
You would recommend the show, it sounds like, then, right?
Absolutely would recommend the show. Yeah, it was really exciting. I mean, it's not perfect, and I will have some criticisms throughout. There are certain moments to me that were like a little bit incredible, and by incredible I mean like not credible. But overall, like, I'm having so much fun, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's the kind of thing that I'll put aside if the storytelling is compelling, and it is here. And I found myself really buying into, not buying into, like, getting emotionally invested in this world, and like the characters trying to imagine a life beyond it. And in this first episode we're about to get to, I love the scene where Juliette got to see this book for the first time with images of the outside world. And I thought it was so incredibly done, where the emotions are hitting me, and I'm like, of course I've seen the world, but like, because I'm experiencing it through her.
I haven't. I've only been here this whole time.
Yeah, there's a world beyond your bedroom, James.
Oh, man. Yes, I agree. I did find quite a few of these moments nearing the end of the show to be pretty emotional. Like,
yeah.
I've like you said, I bought into the world, I bought into the characters, and I'm invested enough to know what happens next. And that's one of the things that I would say, just in my general thoughts, is like, I am dying to know what happens next. And I think that's the sign of a good show, is like, I want to know what goes. And from here, all I know is that, like, as a unit, as a whole, the season 1 was pretty captivating throughout for me, with special note to just like how Rebecca Ferguson completely just like enthralls me the entire show. Like, throughout the entire thing, those emotional beats that I was referencing, like, most of the time it's through her performance or her bouncing off another character that really works for me. And like, she is so captivating on screen, and like seeing how it all comes together. I'm just gonna I already am looking back fondly at this coverage, and I'm excited to one day possibly do more Silo, because there's the second season coming out, and we have more book coverage.
Yeah, I hope we get to, man. People should let us know if that's something they're interested in. Show enthusiasm. That'll make it more likely to happen. You've watched this a second time now. Did you feel like this time through you were catching more? Was there like more there that you were finding, or was it more just like enjoying the thrill of the ride again?
I mean, like, it's funny in hindsight. I bet you there's a few things that I said in our last episode that I was kind of like trying to lead the witness a little bit for you to be like, what do you think about like this specific thing that they're highlighting? Yes, like the lingering shots on mirrors, the overemphasizing shots of like when they're actually suiting somebody up to go out and clean. Like, that is like, I'm like, wow, the filmmaking is really reflecting like the clues. Yeah. So yes, of course, like those things stood out to me, but just in general, like I think I appreciated on this go around the characters a little more. And I think like, because some characters kind of show up and then are not super relevant and then become more relevant as the show goes on. As soon as they showed up for the first time, I kind of appreciated
right. You got a fondness for them already. Yeah.
Yeah. And like with specific recognition to a character that we kind of talked a little bit of trash about was Juliette's father. And like how we're like, yeah, he's like kind of a deadbeat for like the stuff that he does, but we don't know the larger story. And as that gets doled out, and that probably has to do with Ian Glenn's performance as well. Like, he's able to express these emotions of like a regretful father and someone who really doesn't like have a lot of respect for themselves, I guess, and the way they've handled life.
Well, and she like has heaped all this blame on him. I'm sure we'll get to this when we get to the episode, but like, yeah, I definitely feel more sympathetic towards him than I did previously, and I
Yeah.
think that's understandable because the way they set it up, they withhold this information from us.
That was
So
the intention
yeah,
of the filmmakers. They were like, we want you to think that he sucks, and then kind of have a redemption possible kind of thing that goes on. Or at least like in hindsight, you might feel a little differently about him.
I think we're ready to get into it, man. It sounds like we're chomping at the bit, ready to talk about specifics. And speaking of that, we are going to do our 10-minute timer per episode again. We'll read the summary and then start the timer. That way we give each of these about the same amount of weight that we've given all the previous 5.
And it keeps us from rambling.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to do before we move on is this is the first episode you're seeing in this coverage, I really recommend that you go back to our book coverage, the first half of the book. And then last week we talked about the first 5 episodes. This is going to be the second 5 episodes. And in that episode, we also covered Graham Yost, who is the showrunner here, Hugh Howey's involvement in the writer's room, which is really cool. Hugh Howey being the author of the book Wool that this is based on, and then kind of the development and how that came about. But from here on, we're going to get into plot, and we're just going to dive right into this, because that's what we did last week. Juliette arranges for the relic to be found in Doug's apartment and uses it as an excuse to track down supposed relic dealer Regina Jackson, who turns out to be George's previous lover who bought relics for him. Sims learns about George's connection to the relic and formally confronts Juliette. Bernard accepts Juliette's claim that she didn't plant the relic, but he orders her to stop investigating Doug's motives for murdering Johns and Marnes. Juliette and Billings argue over her difficulty in trusting him, and she reveals that she knows he has the syndrome, a medical condition that should disqualify him from being a deputy. Regina tells Juliette that she didn't report George's hard drive to Judicial, but she did tell the man who knows everything about it, and he threatened her loved ones. Regina gives Juliette a cherished relic she received from George, a children's travel book dating from before the silo. While Juliette browses the book in her apartment, she is watched by a surveillance team that has numerous cameras all over the silo with equipment much more advanced than the rest of the silo.
Yeah, and what a good reveal that was. So I wanted to mention the syndrome, and I bet this is one of those things we've heard of, that it comes from future books. That's going to be my guess. Maybe we'll get it in the back half of Wool, but it wasn't really mentioned in the first half of Wool that I can remember. So I have a feeling this was something he introduced later, or it became important later, and they decided to bring it up into the front. Because we read that there were some stuff in future books being brought in.
Yeah.
And the way that affects Billings here, I think, is a really cool twist on this character. You know, all of a sudden, this is where I start to like him, right? I see his family. I see that he kind of has this heart of gold, but he's wanting to follow the letter of the law because that's all he really knows. I don't know. I just really identified with this character and that sort of urge to do that, but then the willingness to start to see and start to question some things, I think.
It brings to light the idea of there are characters in the silo that have things to live for. They have families, they have friends, all that kind of stuff. Juliette seems like she doesn't have family. She has mostly friends because she's kind of pushed away her father. And then we see someone like Billings who has this family but is willing to put his life on the line, but he's also trying to play with within the rules because of that in a way.
But I mean, he doesn't want to. He keeps having to remind Juliette, I have a family. I can't get caught up in this. She's very cavalier about this, and I think throughout, I was a bit torn about it. I tended to be on her side, and I think we're supposed to be. But I was watching all of this with my wife, and she would often point out that Juliette's being kind of an asshole here because she's endangering people. But in her defense, it's what else? How else can she do this? She has to do this. The system is the villain here, and everything about it is made to keep you from pushing back, from asking questions. And if you get involved in any way, all of a sudden you are a potential target. So it forces you to not have friends, to not have allies. And that's just it's a really cool construct for this dystopian story, but it's also just a really interesting look at authoritarian politics and how how people are controlled by their governments when things get turned up to an extreme like this.
Right. And you can see that after what happened to George, she's purposely trying not to have these connections as much anymore because her convictions are so strong that she's like you said, she's willing to do all kinds of stuff that other people who have things to live for are like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, this is a lot. But someone like that needed to come along and shake up the system, clearly. But then interestingly, we see like the juxtaposition of like a Robert Sims and a Bernard Holland. Like, we don't know much of Bernard Holland's backstory, but it seems that he is like, he brings up the idea that like Sims, in a later episode, sends like a escort to his family in a moment of distress, and that showed that he put his family before the silo. And I think Bernard Holland is a character who through and through sees himself as putting the silo before.
He's a mysterious character. We don't know anything about him personally, and like how he got to this position and what he knows. And that's all by design. And he's probably the most obvious villainous character at this point in the story, though. It's still trying to sort of play with this idea that maybe he's not a villain and he's kind of on her side. I don't know if I would have bought this. And I can't say for sure. I don't think I would have, is all I can say, because it seemed like he's way too fishy. And maybe that's the idea, is just that you're suspicious of him, but you don't know for sure until the reveals happen.
Yeah. And there's a lot of Sims, like there's like a few episodes in a row of like Sims being an antagonist over and over and over.
Bernard's
and
like, I'm going to help you with this. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of in the background, maybe shows up like one scene in an episode here or there, and then the reveal comes along. And like, of course, I think a lot of people see that coming, but it doesn't make it any less like terrifying for the characters in the story.
We knew it from the book, is why I say I can't say for sure whether I would have known, because I knew from the book. I'm like, yeah, he's behind this. He's at the head of IT basically. There was one really cool part here too, where there's this like dichotomy between the people who are up top and the people who are down below, right? And it's kind of a stand-in for like class struggle, and it becomes like a proxy, and it's interesting. And she talks about how like we keep you dreamers alive. I think even a specific line she has. We enable you to do the things you do. And yeah, I don't know. It's like, that's a cool appeal to like the blue collar, workers of the world. And there's definitely an element of truth to that. But I think even the show as it goes on would say that both are important. And it's sort of a false dichotomy to pit them against each other. I don't know. It's just interesting, like underpinnings of a class struggle that like I feel like you could write an essay about, like the class struggle and silo.
And there's this sort of mentality in human beings to like create groups, right? Like you want to, they like tend to like create a group and then otherize other people, and it's interesting that like all these people are in the silo. Everyone needs to kind of do their job to keep everything moving and to keep everyone alive, and clearly we see that with like
everybody thinks their job's the most important.
Right. And then they start to try to I guess grapple for power in some cases, because like if the generator is not running, then IT doesn't have its power. If IT doesn't have its power, then it's not able to, he talks about like they distribute the oxygen and they deal with all kinds of other stuff that I should give them credit for, but I don't remember.
Yeah, we don't want to give IT too much credit, but I mean, like he's like making this argument that what he does is actually the most important, but it's like, again, you can't do any of that without the power from the generator. So everything's important.
So a character who continues to like affect the plot, who's been gone for a little bit now, is George. And like we continue to see these flashbacks with he and Juliette, as well as like some of the characters that we get throughout are like referencing what he was doing while he was alive. Yeah,
I mean, and it's good stuff, right? Like we're sort of backfilling their relationship and making it important. It's definitely a bold choice to like have us try and care about this relationship that has, ended as we go throughout. And that's definitely what it's doing here. And then that also sets up this moment where it's like a big thing for Juliette. She finds out that he had this girlfriend from before he like came down to mechanical, and she feels really betrayed by this. I was a little confused as to why she felt so betrayed. I guess if he like directly said he had never had another girlfriend, then that's a lie. But like the implication is that they had broken up and he had left. I don't know. Like, I'm just like, what's the big deal? I don't know. I didn't get it.
I guess it's just something that she didn't know about him or something like that.
No, but she takes it to be this like huge betrayal. Like she's like, oh, I don't even like him. What am I even doing? He didn't care about me, like because he dated someone before you. Like what?
No, I thought that also had to do with the way that he treated that other woman. It sounded like because of like because possibly he was using her.
Talk to somebody's ex. You gotta take it with a grain of salt.
So you're seeing it as jealousy for sure. I could see an element of that, but I also think that in there is like he used that woman for her connections
Right,
to
and
get all of
she's
these items,
worried
these
that the
relics,
same is
that
happening to
she
her.
was also being used, which he kind of says that he was doing in a later episode, and then says that later he fell in love with her as well. So that I think that's
I think you're
partially why
right.
she was
That's what they're going for. I'll stand by it. It came off a little bit as just like jealousy. He had been dating someone else.
Yeah. One of the major things that's wild, though, is that George has left basically the biggest clue of any of the stuff that we've seen, of any of the relics, with this person, the book,
Yeah.
the travel book.
And we already talked about it, but like, what a
Yeah.
moment, man. Like her flipping through that, seeing the outside world, like yeah.
Seeing the fantastic world of Georgia.
Yeah. Well, the look on her face, it was like, it wasn't over the top. It was subtle, but like, it's just a great job of Rebecca Ferguson here of selling this moment, which is a really hard thing to portray. Like, someone who's looking at this for the first time, like, how can we even imagine what this be like? But she really nails it.
That's a huge reveal that I remember affected me heavily in the show.
Yeah.
The first time I watched it, and like seeing like dolphins and forests, and then seeing the helix, like this which he had a tattoo of.
Yeah.
She's like kind of sort of tracing it with her finger.
Yeah,
She's like,
the
holy shit, this
like
is
the
what
seashell, nautilus, or whatever.
Which I mentioned last week. They made a point of not having any like sort of naturalistic things, like in the design or in any of like the art or anything else that was showing up in the silo. But then you see like George has a tattoo.
Yeah.
So he's like pulled that in from his knowledge of all these relics and from this book, really.
It was a really cool way to show that like how important this book was to him, that he had this tattoo, right? And then the next reveal immediately comes of like, we're living in this cool moment and we're like feeling really great for her. And all of a sudden she's being watched through the mirrors. And we just get the sense of like how every time someone's been running a faucet, like, yeah, maybe that does like affect their ability to hear, but they're still watching. Like, in all those moments, they're there, and it just the surveillance and how pervasive it is. That's quite a reveal at the end of this episode.
And they're using like maintenance. Oh, they're coming in to fix your pipes, and they're coming in to fix this and that, but they're actually like installing surveillance in a lot of people's places, because it's clear that they have like limited resources as far as these cameras and some of these speakers and stuff are concerned. But was that something that because I mean, like I kind of led you. You knew something was going on in terms of surveillance.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we a little bit from the book too. I think we kind of got some of this. So it wasn't a huge surprise, but still just, that's the thing. We didn't know for sure. It was my suspicion, but we didn't know for sure.
Super wild though. And then that's a cliffhanger episode ending right there when it kind of pulls out and they're like, oh shit, we need to, go get into action after seeing her like with the book. Cool episode and lots of big reveals. So the timer went off a little bit ago. We're trying to stick to it as much as we can, but episode 7 is called The Flamekeepers. Sims is part of the surveillance team and monitors Juliette's movements via the cameras. Juliette seeks out Gloria, who is being drugged on Meadows' order. Despite Juliette's offer to resign as sheriff, Meadows says she can't lift the order. Billings confronts Juliette when she neglects her duties. She tells him about her investigation into George's murder, and he decides to cover for her. Lucas tries to kiss Juliette, but she rebuffs him. Bernard tells Juliette that he fears Meadows will move against them and encourages her to find a way to control Meadows. With her father's help, Juliette is able to question Gloria and learns that she is part of the Flamekeepers, a secret group dedicated to remembering the past and whose members are systematically wiped out. Juliette's mother befriended Flamekeepers, but Juliette's father obeyed orders to prevent Flamekeepers from having children. Juliette realizes that surveillance cameras are behind the silo's wall mirrors and retrieves George's hard drive from where Holston hid it in Gloria's room. Sims raiders arrive at Gloria's room to apprehend Juliette, who isn't there.
So this starts out with this character, Gloria, who we'd met previously. It's kind of a midwife type character or had advice about
fertility advisor.
Fertility,
or something like that. Yeah.
And she's like on the beach and she's, having a vision. And we find out that she's being drugged and kept against her will in this facility.
Did you think that maybe I was like, that was like a huge clue to me being right about this, not the silo not being as old? Like she had actually been to a beach before or something like that?
No. I assumed immediately this was some sort of just like delusion. And it looked just like the beach out of the picture too, is the thing. I was like, they must be going for this. But I mean, it was a really cool moment, and it showed her mental state, right, and how she is sort of lost in these dreams. And it becomes an interesting sort of fulcrum that they all sort of gather around her, and Juliette trying to figure out what she knows and what she knows about this book and what she knows about George. And we learn about the Flamekeepers for the first time, which is a really big reveal, right? Like there's, her mother was maybe not a Flamekeeper, but like associated with them in some way.
Working with them for sure.
Working with them. And there are these people who were like trying to keep alive the memory of the world before the silo. And that's just a really cool concept. I like that. Really interesting.
I mean, a rebel group that like is like the keepers of knowledge and trying to pass on like that's pretty awesome. That organization is really cool. And then we learned that like her mom on her own was gonna like be the same type of person and probably would have become a Flamekeeper. And then the sort of larger, I gotta say this now, the way that they marry the A story and the B story in a lot of these episodes is so smart and can be so like exhilarating. Like if it's a chase scene and they're like, somebody's in an apartment and they're chasing, they're trying to get there in time. But then they also are really good about being like, while we're having these flashbacks with Juliette's mother, we also learn that her father was involved with like making sure people who were possible Flamekeepers had kept their, like, without their knowledge, kept their birth control in so that they couldn't reproduce, which is wild. And then we get the reveal that she was kind of never supposed to be born because her mother was flagged as a Flamekeeper. So we have to assume that her mom maybe found out and was able to remove her birth control or something like that went on.
Or, I mean, he says mistakes happen, or I think at one point Bernard says that. And, that's accurate with any kind of birth control. So it could just be like, still got pregnant, even with the birth control. There is a part here that I thought I was kind of having a chuckle about, and that's this guy. His name's Lucas, I think, or maybe that's his name in the book. I don't know if it's the same in the show, but he's this guy from IT, and he's the one who's in the cafeteria. And there's just been these moments where Juliette comes by, and he starts hitting on her. And I just, like, I had the reaction of, like, oh, the sheer gall of this guy.
But you didn't feel that way with George, right? Like, so there's a difference between them?
I don't know. George, it was like they were already in a relationship. Okay. This was like, she's the sheriff, and she's walking around looking like she's going to murder you. Like, she looks so intimidating. Rebecca Ferguson is, like, killing it, right? And, like, yeah, she comes in and, like, is a little bit friendly, but just, like, the sheer gall of this guy to hit on her, I don't know. I mean, like, I mean, more power to him, but like,
I was gonna say he likes a woman in power. Like,
I mean, like, it's bold. It's bold.
Sure. I like the way that they play with him as a character as a possible follow-up love interest, but she's sort of, again, pushing these people away right now because she's realizing they're bigger fish to fry. But she, at the same time, you can see that, like, maybe in a different scenario, they may have had some chemistry and gotten together.
If she wasn't in the middle of this crazy investigation where she's unlocking the secrets of the silo, she probably would be interested in this guy.
Yeah, but this guy. But then, like, as it goes on, we learn like his character based on like some of the things that he does. Like as time goes, whereas George as a character we're seeing through flashbacks and through some other things that he wouldn't have. I'll just say it. This guy eventually breaks in a sense and like kind of gives all the information he can to IT. Whereas George would have been the complete opposite. So it's like. It's interesting to like compare those two people as possible.
I wasn't clear on like how much he actually revealed. It seemed like they already kind of knew everything, and then he just got punished for it, right?
Yeah, he revealed enough. Like that's what I think. Like it's
I don't know. I felt kind of bad for him because it was like
of course.
He didn't know what the hell
he wasn't involved in the whole situation like George was. Like George was like knee deep in it. This guy just like glancing blow.
This is another situation where like the level of involvement that she puts on him. Like she doesn't know this guy, and she's like immediately like risking his life. And again, I tend to be like, yeah, it's understandable though in this circumstance, but like you can kind of view it as her being pretty cavalier with other people's lives.
Yeah, we call it, like I said, strong conviction. She has very strong conviction, and she's main character energy, like you said in one of our other episodes.
Yeah. So the judge is also an interesting development here, because at first she seems like maybe she's kind of in charge of everything.
Yeah. Did you ever buy into any of that? That she may have been the actual ultimate baddie?
No, but again, it's hard for me to say for sure what I would have thought because I already knew from the book a little bit. But it was interesting, like her like mysterious illness. Was an interesting plot point because it was like I'm still unsure exactly what they're trying to say with that. Like, is she faking that illness? Is she not actually sick?
I think so. I think she was faking it because she's a puppet And they like at times maybe she would have like folded in certain scenarios in terms of questioning or this or that.
So something about what's going on in the murder of these characters that she kind of knows maybe is happening. That's why she's ill now.
They see her as like a liability, and I think they tell her to isolate, and then that's how it goes.
Well, and there was the cool moment where Juliette goes to her place, and we see that she has these relics inside, and it's like clearly there's like perks to the job, right? Like she's able to have some of this stuff, and yet she
like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, like an Etch-a-Sketch. and Juliette's trying to get information from her, and she's like, I can't tell you this. I can't talk about this. And this is when we get like a pretty chilling little story about the man who comes at night and stands in darkness in your bedroom and tells you everything he knows. And I assume this is Bernard, right? Like pretty much has to be Bernard, right?
Has to be, unless there's some other
somebody else
person. There's a couple things that
man out there.
I get what Dayman would totally take down Nightman. That's all I would say about that. Fighter of the Nightman. Anyway, there are a couple things that I think we should keep in mind, and that's like leading up to the end of the series that we can get into some speculation. But there's this hatch that George talks about that we never get the full reveal on, but supposedly there's a large door or a hatch
down there,
down and below. And I wonder if now that we get the big reveal at the end, that like their silos all very close together. I'm wondering if there's.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but like let's return to this when we get to the end, because I'm like, how is this going to be dealt with when our main character is out where she is at the end of this season?
My theory is that in the book, remember, we're getting parts 1, 2, and 3 were all different characters' POVs. I'm curious if we get more characters' POVs for the remainder of the book, and if like maybe some people in the silo.
But Juliette's like, I gotta know what goes on with Juliette too, though.
I hope that we get more of Juliette's story. There's no, I feel like there's almost no way that we won't. Actually, she's in season. I mean, she's a major part of season 2.
She's been cast for season 2. Yeah, good to note.
But so the idea that like this comes at night man could be somebody from another silo or something, like, you know what I mean? Like there's a possibility that there's some cross contamination with people that we aren't privy to yet.
Yeah, it was a cool little moment because like they don't have any concept of how they are able to, like, they don't know what cameras are and what videos are. So the idea is it borderlines on that area of like stuff would seem like magic. So like the way she sort of has this like built up fear of this guy, it like totally makes sense that it would almost be like a boogeyman to her. Like he knows things he shouldn't know. Like he just knows everything, and he just shows up in a place he shouldn't be. You know what I mean? Like it's chilling.
And I think it's notable too, just to talk about Bernard too, in the greater context of all these episodes. Like there are times that he shows fear. Like there's this little dongle that he looks at that has 18 on it when it's flashing. There's a few times like that,
which we actually know a little bit more about what that 18 might mean. Well, maybe let's wait for the end so that, you know, maybe show only watchers can check out if they don't want to hear about it. But we know a little bit more about that from the book.
But the idea that he's fearful of something, some larger entity, some larger power. Like there's a few times where he doesn't seem like he's as much in control as the whole story would have us believe.
I like that this sort of goes back and shows us something about Holston, and that he knew about the cameras, and it reveals like the flowers and how he was putting them in certain places, and like he was onto all of this, and we just didn't realize it. I thought that was really cool, like way to recontextualize like what we had seen early. Because
he sort of made a deal with Juliette at one point. He's like, I'll send you a signal in the intervening time from the time that he was like, I'll send you a signal after she took him down into the depths. Until he goes out and cleans. It's cool to know that like he was also very savvy and had figured out some of this stuff, and was, because like putting it in Gloria's room again, the mystery is like, I wouldn't have figured this mystery out based on the clues. Like that's just like a lot. Like it's lucky that she thought like, okay, Holston would hide this in Gloria's room. Yeah, I mean, she comes to all the breadcrumbs exactly when she needs to. It's a good thing she didn't find anything out of order, because it would have been very confusing.
Well, that's the timer, so I'm ready to move in order to the next episode.
Episode 8 is called Hanna. Judicial searches the sheriff's office for the hard drive but cannot find it. Juliette retaliates by using Billings' knowledge of the pact to temporarily arrest Sims. While Sims is in custody, Juliette searches his office and finds files on Hanna, Walker, and Shirley Campbell. Hanna's file confirms that Judicial's surveillance cameras are how they knew that Hanna had built an illegal multi-lens magnifier. Hanna and Juliette had believed that Pete told Judicial. Juliette reconciles with Pete, and he tells her that Hannah's subversive behavior and suicide were a response to Jacob's death, which Hanna believed the magnifier technology could have prevented. Juliette is unable to access the hard drive's content. Lucas is too afraid to help, and judicial checkpoints prevent her from reaching Walker. Bernard finds Juliette and reveals himself to be the true person in charge of the silo and responsible for John's and Marn's deaths. Bernard and Sims arrest Juliette, take the hard drive, and fraudulently claim that Juliette has asked to go outside. Juliette jumps off the silo's central stairs to escape with the hard drive.
So this was a really thrilling episode, and it shows a lot of, we get this flashback that shows a lot of what's been going on in her family in the past. She gets this rabbit. We meet her mother. We had seen her briefly, but we get to spend a little more time with her mother, and we start to get the sense of who she was. And that she's willing to, get this magnifier set up and learn about. It's like I love this little story, this little mini story about how she's motivated to try. She's a doctor and she's trying to save her son, and she realizes if we can get in there and we can see, we'll be able to potentially, surgically repair or whatever it was, understand his heart defect.
I think this is actually after the son has died, though. So it's in response to the son dying.
Oh, we could have saved him. If we had this technology. Yeah, I think you're right.
By the way, the way that it's strewn about with normal mundane objects that she then puts together and MacGyver's, it's so fucking cool. I'm oh my God, it's really cool. So you obviously know where Juliette gets it from in some sense.
Yeah. I also love the boldness of her going to Sims's office and arresting him. I don't know. I just love that.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. I was hell yeah. Because I kept wanting her to push back on people a little more. I don't know. It felt like she wasn't leveraging the power that she has as sheriff.
Yeah. They're turning over all the office, everything like that. And she's just all dumping out her backpack. And then immediately, I think basically the next scene, she goes down to his office and she's yeah, you're under arrest, bro. For all that shit you just did, you're under arrest. Yeah. And you're oh shit. And then the craziest part, and again, to talk about, maybe we should come back around to something you said last week, is Common, did he grow on you? The performance throughout?
Good question.
Because when he's in that cell and he's kind of half threatening, half not, all the officers, and he's I won't hold that against you and all that stuff. I'm damn, this is working for me, man.
That was probably my favorite moment for Sims. I was gonna highlight that moment when he's in the jail, and it's kind of the Hannibal Lecter moment of everybody's afraid of him, and he's sitting in there and he knows it, and he's give me some coffee, and give me a phone call, and then the guy's pissing himself, trying to tell him no, because he knows that he has all the real power. I thought that all worked really well. We do get a little bit more with the family here, trying to set up the important things we're going to get, I think, in the next episode with the family, which humanizes him a bit. So I would say overall, yes, my sort of regard for Common, his performance in this show, has increased. I like it a little more. I still think he's one of the weaker of our leads, just because he at times can be just a little one note. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm not, who am I to say? But just for me, still just kind of good, not great.
Yeah. I mean, the material he's given too is basically just we think that he might be a big bad, or you could theorize that, but ultimately he's an underling. And so he's given a certain parameters to sort of,
I think that's what I would have liked a little more from, rather than just kind of sort of throwing criticism, what would I have liked to see a little more from that character? And I think it is a little more of internal conflict being demonstrated in his decision making, especially as things begin to unravel and he witnesses things, and he's got to be questioning, right, on some level, but I wasn't getting that sense a lot. I don't know, it wasn't coming across for me.
I almost guarantee that's where his character's headed in season 2.
It feels like
almost,
it, yeah.
Yeah, because he's got that motivation. Like I said, he's got the family, and you could tell there are times that Bernard is talking about how he's kind of
Potential
wishy-washy
shadow,
on making him the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that he and his wife, Sims and his wife, have this mastermind plan that they've sort of orchestrated, and it'll be interesting to see if they're able to follow through with that. But also at the end, in the final episode, there are things that clearly Sims doesn't know. like Bernard takes off and Sims is like, wait, what's going on? What's going on? So like maybe some of that, like that knowledge that he didn't have, even though he thought he knew everything that happened in the silo, could prompt some sort of revelation or some change in his character.
Some of my notes from this episode is just that Billings is such a good dude. I don't know. I don't even remember what that was in response to. But I'm like, clearly he was growing on me as I was continuing to watch.
He clearly was in the pocket of judicial when we first meet him. And like I said, he's willing to question the status quo. He's willing to hear out different points of view. And as that goes on, he's like, there is something weird going on here. And he stands up to Sims. He actually arrests Sims, which is a danger.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. It's probably when he arrested Sims. I was like, fuck yeah, dude.
So I like that character a lot.
Yeah. And then we get the reveal, right? The Bernard reveal. They're in the cornfield, and he does the thing where he says like, oops, I shouldn't have known that, it was a hard drive, and kind of mustache twirly a little bit. But then like right then the Raiders all show up, and then we have the chase and the fight. There's an interesting moment where like one of the Raiders gives like a look that is like, oh, well, that person seemed to be like registering something. And that becomes important. I think next episode we see that person again.
I like that they're highlighting human nature in some people. I think it's like, I don't know if it's nature, nurture, what it is, but in some people, like, you're willing to question and you're willing to say, wait, isn't this a bridge too far?
Yeah.
They clearly just framed her.
It's a good reminder that like the soldiers, the people who are in IT and watching these cameras, like none of them have all the information. None of them are like as high up on the ladder as Bernard, obviously. And so, like, there's always going to be some element of, like, I don't know, like, accountability to each of them, where they are having to make at least somewhat of a choice about what they're doing. And I think that's a good reminder, too, of, like, wherever you fall in this hierarchy, like, there's always opportunities to fight against the system. But often people don't, but, like, there is, the thing is there. The moment is there. I
think that's cool as an allegory for our world, obviously. Just like the idea of like whatever scenario you're in, like you can do the right thing. You can decide for yourself. Often we see characters deciding for themselves, and you can tell that like they think they're doing the right thing in this show. I like that we're seeing people on many different like levels and tiers and walks of life kind of come to some of these conclusions, even though they might not have been exposed to all that information, like you said, from like a Bernard or like a Sims, like the stuff that they know.
Yeah, so you're saying like people who they think that supporting the system is the right thing to do, right? And like I think that's just a natural, like time and again, studies have shown that people respond to positions of authority, right? Like it's the famous, the Milford experiment, where the people were like shocking people beyond levels where the person was like screaming and like potentially life threatening, just because somebody was standing there with a clipboard telling them to do it, right? And like so many of the people who participated in the study did it. And the whole point of the study was to show like if somebody in a position of authority tells you to do something, like it's kind of human nature, and you have to fight against that. I think we all have to remember that and say, like, you don't just necessarily go along with it because someone tells you to.
And there's a bit of like a bystander effect too, right? Where people, like, if you see something going on, like you're like, well, I mean, how could they be doing that if it's the wrong thing to do? And like, I think just being aware of that kind of thing.
You let go of control and you say, well, that must be something in the system. That must be accounted for. That must be something by design, right? I don't know, or it's not my fault. It's the system's fault. I'm just a piece of it now. Like you sort of like let go of any responsibility that you might have or might feel that you have. I did also love here, to bring it back to the characters. This was where we got the forgiveness of Juliette's father, and the recognition that because Juliette now knows of the existence of cameras, there was this fundamental betrayal that her mother saw, and that Juliette believed, and that's that they both believed her dad turned them in, and like turned her mother in, and that's why the Raiders came and destroyed the magnifying glass. That he was the one responsible for it, and he said, "I didn't do it," and his wife didn't believe him, and Juliette didn't believe him. And now that she's seen the cameras, she knows that he's actually telling the truth. He didn't turn her in.
Of course she would think that. because she has no idea of a camera. So the only person who could have is Juliette, which she knows it wasn't Juliette, or him, Pete. And he kind of takes it, and he like, even though he didn't do it, like in some weird way, he like is willing to bear that for Juliette's sake in a lot of interesting ways. But yeah, I mean, even like for for the Raiders to come in and break that magnifying device, supposedly that's like what broke Hannah's her will to live, and then eventually she broke her spirit. She eventually killed herself, and there were like some weird looks when the Raiders came in too, where he like kind of nodded to them and stuff, and you're like, okay, it seems like there might have been something going on there, but he was just trying to operate in a way that a lot of people do. They're trying to just look out for their own best interest.
Trying to reduce harm in the moment.
Exactly.
Right? Like, what can I do in this moment to make this situation less harmful? And he, I do like that he takes some accountability, though. And, like, even with the forgiveness, he says, like, there are things I should have done differently. I should have been there. I should have pushed, like... And whether or not he would have been able to, you can maybe debate, but like I think that is good from him too, and not him just saying like, I told you so. It's like, no, I've made some mistakes too, and he recognizes that.
Well, and they relate this to him obviously being the person who was preventing a lot of people from getting pregnant,
yeah,
like controlling
exactly.
the pregnancy. Like that he went along with that for a long time, but because it was in his family's best interest to just like kind of lay low. Yeah. And that's kind of the commentary they're making there.
Well, and he said like, I assumed there was a reason, like what we were talking about, right? Like he's just like he's a part of a system, and he didn't question it. Like some people don't.
I want to talk about, because we've been talking a lot about cliffhangers. Juliette, at the end of this episode, she's able to break free of
jumps over the railing. Yeah, I didn't love this one. I'm gonna say, like.
Well, and I didn't know that.
Are we supposed to think she's gonna die? No,
yeah,
she's not dead.
She like jumps off the railing.
She falls like 30 feet onto concrete, and she doesn't even roll. She just face plants.
I just didn't know this was something you could do. I'm like, damn, I'd be like I
like in the real
people
world
doing this? well, I guess like yeah, technically like as far as physics are concerned, she like jumped out and then somehow came back in to the stairs.
I don't know.
It's like a spiral.
Yeah, there's like these outcroppings that come from the spiral, and maybe like if you jump off a certain point, you can land on
like
that.
A walkway or something.
I think that's what it was. It was like onto a walkway, but it looked like it was pretty far, and it was just solid concrete. And again, she just face planted on it and then got up and ran.
I think it's a calling card of the show. Is what I want to highlight. It's like
for sure. Every episode, we're gonna give you some sort of cliffhanger. It was cool to bring it back to the syndrome, and that's why she was able to escape. But we are past our timer, so we need to move on.
So episode 9 is called The Getaway. Juliette escapes and evades judicial's cameras. Billings investigates Juliette's apartment and finds the children's travel book. He keeps one page but burns the rest. Juliette breaks into Sim's apartment and uses his computer to access the hard drive, on which she finds a video message George made for her. Bernard arrests Lucas and learns the hard drive's serial number, which he uses to find Juliette's location. Sims and his raiders rush to the apartment, but Sim's wife allows her to escape. Juliette gets Patrick's help with Danny, Patrick's IT contact, to access the hard drive. She watches the rest of George's video, in which he tells her that he loves her and that she needs to find the door underneath the silo. Following George's advice, Juliette, Patrick, and Danny watch a video from a past cleaning, which shows a lush green landscape with birds flying outside the silo.
This was a really good episode, man. This is where I was talking about, like, man, things are just really ramping up. Like, we immediately went into this one, and then as soon as we watched this one, we're like, well, we gotta watch the next one now. It was one of those, like, you can't stop now. I like that this was like a whole episode of her on the run. And she's like using her knowledge of the silo to get around, and she now knows about these cameras, so she's able to hide from them. And she knows that they're behind these mirrors. I thought this was all really cool. There's really cool stuff. And then, I think kind of a brilliant move on her part to go to where Sims lives and use his computer to access the hard drive. I thought that was all really cool. The stuff with Sims's wife, who is like a former raider, we find out.
He was close on her heels he was just doing it because he wanted his family to be safe. But those raiders actually wanted to come in the house and search it. And Juliette was in there. And so like that would have worked out for Sims, obviously. But
he got in trouble for it, though, from Bernard.
I can also understand not wanting raiders to come into your apartment.
Yeah, and she knows. It's funny. It's like she's the one, and she's like, I did your job. I know that I don't want you in here.
Yep. And
so one of the things I thought that this episode highlighted well, and honestly this whole show, is the way that authoritarian, fascist systems often rely on individual people to take up the sort of cause, to take up the oppression themselves and enforce it themselves. Because these systems, like, they know they can't be everywhere. They can't have eyes everywhere. They can't have somebody there to enforce. So what they have to do is, like, create enough fear and enough compulsed sort of subservience in a populace where people will turn in their neighbors, right? And that's something that you see time and again. It's like, you know, you're hiding somebody. You're doing a thing you're not allowed to do. I'm going to tell on you because I know that the punishment for me not telling what I've seen is probably just as severe as doing the thing itself. So time and again, we see this where, like, the whole system reinforces itself through the people. And it's really hard to, like, tell somebody that they should be willing to put themselves at risk. But the reality is it takes people doing that, even within these environments, to still have the sort of bravery to be willing to put yourself at risk. And I don't know, it's tough. It's a tough situation, but it just shows the power, I think, of these systems.
Yeah, and if you inspire more than just an individual, like an individual standing on their own is like vulnerable, obviously. But if you are able to band together, I think that, like,
right,
typically that's like the way to fight against this.
Yeah,
and
but like the whole system is to prevent you from banding together, right? Just prevent you from doing that. We also then get the moment where she plugs in this hard drive, and she's a little bit like cavalier with leaving her behind her and, like, you know, totally not paying attention to her. But I can empathize because she's seeing some mind blowing shit right now on this computer.
Yeah. Well, she also does her due diligence, it seems, or they try to lampshade it a little bit, where she's like moving hammers away.
Yeah,
and
I
knives
like that.
and
I like
kind
that.
of thing. So at least she, like, did something. But yeah, like, this person's clearly very savvy. Like, they're gonna figure a way out of these handcuffs.
Yeah. But it creates a thrilling sort of, you know, there's like a loading screen, but then she's getting free back there, and it's there's a lot of, like, oh, and they're, like, gonna figure out where you are and find her.
And then they're just running. Like, tons of people are, like, specifically Sims keeps, like,
this
summoning
show does
all
so
of
many
these raiders.
timers. I just saw Alien Romulus in the theater, and, like, there are so many timers in that movie that, like, create this sense of, like, oh my god, everything has to happen right now.
It's hectic. Yeah. It's very effective.
Yeah, and it works really well in this show too. Anyway, so then when she finds this file, she's, like, scrolling through all these files, and then she finds one's like, start here, and she's like, oh, that's helpful. She clicks on it, and then we see it's a video from George talking to her, and this is the moment where she realizes that his love for her was real. He says that here. I guess it was pretty fortunate that, like, he had, like, thought to say that in this video. Directly addressed what she had learned, and maybe he, like, was able to, like, predict that she was going to learn some things about him that she wasn't going to like. And he's like, yeah, you know, I came down here to use you, and you know, then the funniest thing happened. I ended up falling in love. So that sort of is a sweet moment, and of course the whole time we're having this sweet moment, like, behind her, she's getting free. We're like, what's going to happen? She's going to get a hammer. It was a cool moment for sure. Seeing a video for the first time. What's this? This is a thing called a video. I love that.
Yeah.
Like, how mind blowing would that be? Like, I almost like I like the way they played it, but also, like, I don't know. I mean, like, they've seen the view of the outside world when they're in the cafeteria. Like, what do they not think that's a video? Like, I don't know. It's so it's like they have some concept of this. But, like, on the other hand, I'm like, man, how would you react to seeing a video for the first time if you didn't know it was a thing that exists?
But you're right, because, like, the screen goes down when the power goes out and stuff. Like, they know that that's not a window. Like, that's some sort of screen.
But maybe it's like they think it's a feed. But, like, yeah, you would think that a video would not be much of a stretch.
They have computer screens. They have, like, I don't know, really interesting. But anyway, I'll buy it. But the funny thing is that George in this video, he's like, I'm a genius, so I fixed this technology, this camera. I fixed it. And, you know, it's technology that's, like, well beyond anything he's probably ever seen. Or, I don't know, he's seen some Relic, so well beyond most of what anybody's ever seen in the silo. And then he's like, but I got stopped by this big door.
Yeah.
I'm going to need your help to get through the door.
Yeah.
He's like, I figured out this technology by myself, but not this big door.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
I mean, hey, a big door can be a real obstacle sometimes.
I guess, yeah. And she
Yeah.
does handle large machinery, and maybe she knows how to get through it.
Yeah.
But I'm so fascinated by what's going on with that door, and the fact that he tells her to go through it and she doesn't.
Yeah.
So there's like open mystery there.
I'm fascinated too, man. This is next episode, but since we're talking about the door, there's a moment where she mentions it to Bernard. And my wife and I both kind of looked at each other and were like, I don't think he knew about the door. And the way he reacts to it is, I don't think he knows about it. So we don't know much about Bernard and what he knows and what he doesn't, but it just seemed like the way it was performed by Tim Robbins in the moment is like, this was news to him. So that's interesting implications too.
Yeah, I also kind of was curious about that. I was wondering if he knew about it and he was reacting like, oh shoot, you know about that, was it like
kind of a like? I mean, it's hard to read exactly what he's showing. Yeah. It's not obvious, but like we both kind of got a read that he didn't seem to have known about it.
It would be cool if he'd never seen that down below and that the drill that obviously seemed to have dug out the silo and everything. That's pretty wild. But yeah, that we'll talk about that a little more next episode maybe.
Billings, we got to talk about him a little bit here because he finds the relic and he looks at it and we get another moment of just incredible, like emotional moment of him looking through this and he has this whole like he has even less of a I think concept of this sort of thing. Like it's a complete shock to him. He's tearing up as he's looking at it, which I think is the right. And then he burns it and like. I was simultaneously like, this totally makes sense because it is very dangerous, but also like you feel like you're losing something important when he burns it, right?
Yeah,
and
totally. He at that point, Juliette, I'm so curious how much he's bought into the powers that be at this point because she supposedly said that she wanted to go out, and he is if he believes that
he has to know that
she wants to go out. I would think so. Yeah. But then if he believed in any way that she actually did want to go out, then he's like, shit, this is like not something I want to hang on to in any way, and this is something that I don't think anyone.
So he tears out a page.
Yeah.
Do we see that page?
No.
So we don't know what page he tore out.
We don't see the page, and we don't see it show up again for the rest of the show.
I think he like puts it in a pocket, but yeah, I don't remember him. Maybe he was looking at it again in another scene. I can't remember, but like, yeah, we never see what it is, regardless. And I'm curious what you think it might have been. Like, because if you're gonna burn the book but keep the page that has like the beach on it,
I don't think you're keeping the beach.
What what are you doing? Just keep the book.
I don't think you're keeping the beach.
I mean, it's smaller, I guess, but like,
what's wild is that like no character ever had a chance to actually like read through all of it, and there's like probably some solid information because she finds one that's about like space. Like some, she starts reading some stuff about.
I think the implication is it's maybe a page we haven't seen yet, and like both of them probably did look through more of the book than we realize.
I hope so. Yeah.
And yeah, I think the implication is that that's my bet. My bet is that's going to be revealed next season, obviously, and we're going to see maybe a page that we didn't know he saw. Because we didn't even know it existed. She
sent a letter to Lucas as well, where she kind of said, like, I may have found a secret about the W, which ended up being one of the star formations. Yeah. So I think she probably did read through most of it.
Yeah, I think she did, and we just weren't.
I was bummed that Billings burned it personally. I was just like, oh man, like a piece of their history. Like who knows what else? Like what's going to go on?
The opposite of a flamekeeper, man. You're putting out. You're lighting a flame, but you're putting it out. Essentially, like you're destroying. This, but I think given the context of his family, it makes sense, right? Like he can't risk losing them. He can't risk losing everything, and he knows he's like, I've got a kid, and like they're going to make me go clean if I'm caught with this. I have to destroy this. It's too dangerous. But he can't. But like he knows it now. You know what I mean? So it's like he can't get rid of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of that like enduring human spirit kind of thing. That like it's going on with that little piece that sticks in your brain. But I thought it was really clever how like they've completely just like stripped her entire apartment. Still, she found a place where she could hide the travel book, and it was like in that sort of like medicine cabinet kind of thing.
It's like the pocket where the medicine cabinet sits. Like, it was clever, and it's believable that could be a place where they wouldn't find it. Yeah, I like that.
It makes me want to like find a bunch of secret compartments in my house and like hide stuff. I want to have a bunch of cool pockets.
Hide little travel books to like Georgia in them.
Yeah. Georgia.
for future generations.
All right, so that's the timer. We are moving on to episode 10.
Final episode. Yeah.
It is called Outside. Juliette has Danny broadcast the outside footage to the whole silo, but the broadcast is quickly shut down by Bernard. Billings is questioned by Sims on his condition and later tells his wife that they are making an exception so he can be sheriff. Juliette escapes to Mechanical, where she talks to Walker before being arrested. Bernard offers Juliette a deal. If she will go out willingly, he will tell her what happened to George and ensure that Mechanical will not be punished. Bernard shows Juliette footage of George jumping off the stairs to avoid interrogation. Bernard destroys the hard drive but later recovers the disk after Juliette mentions a door underneath the silo. Bernard sentences Lucas to the mines. Juliette goes outside and her helmet display shows the exact same footage of a lush landscape from the previous cleaning. She realizes the deception, discovering that the reality is the desolate view of the silo's screens. Because Walker has arranged for the heat tape on Juliette's suit to be very good quality instead of dying there, Juliette climbs the crater that surrounds the silo and out of view of its residents. She sees dozens of similar craters, each with its own silo and a ruined city on the horizon. Apparently, Bernard recovering the disc might be because of him hearing about the door down below. So maybe he's like, oh shit, I need to learn about this.
Something he needs to learn about. Yeah, that's interesting. So I go back to something that this summary states as fact, and that's that that she broadcast this to the entire silo. And I didn't get the sense that that was true. Because later on when she's leaving and she's on her cleaning, like I didn't get the sense that all these people had seen it, had seen what was shown, right? Like nobody's talking about it. Like, wouldn't they have all seen it? Or at least like it would be something everyone would be talking about.
We don't get the POV outside of a lot of our like main core cast of characters.
Yeah.
I feel like when we saw it, when they were broadcasting it, it showed up at least on the screen that they were broadcasting it from, and then it showed up on all of IT's monitors.
All of IT definitely saw it. But I was not clear that everybody else saw it. Well, I mean, the summary states that everybody saw it.
And also, like, we've seen other characters throughout the silo see weird things with the outside world that weren't addressed, like the time that the power went down and right before it went out, it's flashed to like the green lush back to the desolate.
Right.
So I wonder if it's just something that they just haven't addressed as far as like characters in the silo. Maybe there are like rumblings going on.
Yeah.
Because there are a few times throughout the show that there will be like characters being spoken about or rumblings going on and rumors spreading throughout the silo that we don't know for sure have spread, but the characters will like kind of acknowledge along the way.
I did love the moment where Bernard and he has everybody turn around, close your eyes, and then he's like, "You are going to unsee what you saw." Like it's such a funny like order to give.
Yeah.
He's like, "You too," to Sims, like nobody look at this. You didn't see that.
To not play it off and to make a big deal of it is going to stick in these people's minds even more, rather than him saying, this is propaganda, this is this is that. He just like has a freak out and is like, don't look at it because that's the truth.
So immediately they all know this is super important.
Yeah. And it's, I liked that they made a point of showing a few reaction shots of a few people in IT where like some of them turned around immediately and there was one guy that was like lingering and then he was like forcibly turned around. Yeah. So it's, again, that kind of idea of like human nature, of curiosity and all of that. You can't beat it down out of anybody.
Yeah. God, really interesting stuff, man. We get the reveal of how George killed himself and him. He sort of like knew he was going to be tortured into revealing information, so he chose to do this instead. Very dark. But it's kind of I don't know, like an empowering moment for him. It's like better than him being pushed off or thrown off, like that he chose to do it himself.
In a world and in a society that does nothing but control, he chose to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't taken from him. He was like, this is something you can, like, you're not going to get this information out of me, even though you want to, and I'm going to do something that you can't stop me from doing.
I was surprised how much I ended up liking him as a character, even though like he's dead, like from the start of the show. But like all that we learned about him, I like him. I like her using the garbage chute here to get around.
Yeah, very Star Wars.
Yeah, very Star Wars. I thought it was fun too. It just like reminds me,
or just like Die Hard, like in the elevator shaft, like anything like that. But it was so funny that they were just dumping bullshit on her. They're like, knock her off.
Yeah. When they're trying to get so I live in a condo building where we have a garbage chute. And it has this thing where like the lights on, the lights off. Like if it's in use, you can't open the door and all that stuff. And so when he's like the lights on, and then they go in anyway, and like so I was like, I don't know. I had a reaction to it because like, it's something I actually deal with. Like, you don't want to go in there. Like, you get something
makes it
fall
even
on
more
you.
tense.
Yeah, and like it would be very dangerous. I liked a lot of that. I will say this is one of the moments where, again, the physics is a little fast and loose. She falls pretty freaking far. I don't know. I'm not sure what floor she was on. I think it was towards the bottom. But she seems to fall pretty far. She lands on a small pile of trash, which I think there was a Mythbusters about landing on trash and how it's actually not a good idea. It's a very bad idea to land on random
Unless
trash.
it's just giant boxes of cardboard. Just stacked up boxes
if you get
of
really
cardboard.
lucky. And then she does it, and they're able to like recognize that she is a person who has fallen down the chute, run over, grab her, and pull her out before the giant thing that they dropped lands.
That was very close to her. It was within like 20 yards of her.
She saw
like
it. That's why she let go.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that was again like a moment of like, if this was a show that I wasn't enjoying as much, would frustrate me more. But I'm like willing to be like, okay, whatever. You know, we're gonna do that. It's a little bit silly, but okay.
They at least like had her be like pretty injured. Like she was injured from that fall. It seemed.
She's not that.
I mean,
injured.
in a sense, her arm and stuff, they had wrapped it. Like it seemed like, and she was like knocked out
classic
or something.
TV. Oh, my arm for one scene, and then I'm fine. But I mean, like it was thrilling, and I liked her. Like all of a sudden, we meet these dealers, or this dealer, and then the IT guy, and they are able to spoof like the location of where that's being watched. I thought that was cool. It made sense. Interesting that Bernard like figures it out. He's like, no, there's no way. You know, this is something that, you know, he realizes that he's being fooled in that sense. So kind of a cat and mouse game with them. That was all really cool. I don't know. I liked all this. And then the reveal of the outside world. We had known from the book, you know, essentially that this screen was the false thing being shown. The screen was the false thing, and that the reality was the wasteland. That was revealed to us in like the opening chapter of the book. And then this show waited until the end of the first season. That's a big difference.
That was one of the first things that in that book coverage that I talked about, is like, it's so wild. Some of the reveals come so early.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that means that like the rest of the book has like so many other things at play.
Yeah.
And it's cool that they changed it for the show, and it makes a lot of sense. Like this very much did feel like it was adapted well for TV.
Yeah.
And like the things that they changed were very smart. And I think that both mediums are really cool for their.
I do think maybe there was like an episode or two worth of padding that probably wasn't necessary.
Well, yeah.
Especially early.
I definitely agree with you. I mentioned that last week.
Yeah.
There's definitely like maybe one or two episodes in here that at least could have been slimmed down.
Yeah.
But I like living in this world. I like seeing more of it. I didn't regret any of that.
And it was cool that the heat tape, the thing that kept getting brought up time and again about like, oh, you stole a heat tape, like that actually ended up being important.
That was a big hint that I was trying to give you. Not that I was trying to give you a hint, but I wanted to at least have referenced it last week so that we could then to this week talk about it. The heat tape being important is it's cool, and I love the
It's
scrappy
not really
nature.
confirmed, but like that does seem to be the difference, is that, you know, better heat tape holds up better. My wife and I were talking about this, and we're like, why do they die? It must be that the air outside is poison, right?
Yes. I think so.
It has to be, because I was like, could they? Because like he takes his helmet off, the other guy does, and he still dies. So it can't just be that they're like pumping poison into the suit. It's like the suits were poorly made, but probably on purpose.
Yeah, on first viewing of the show, I thought that that's what it was. I was like, oh, there's poison within the suit, and they trap them in there, and they can't get out. But yeah, I think it is that like you want to be contained from the outside.
Yeah, but they just do it. They know that they're like, we're gonna make it have a leak so that they'll die right away.
I like the scrappy nature of the mechanical and just like everything in the down deep, really. I like that they stick together when like there's the scenario where like Walker's waiting for Juliette to come back, and she's like calling out to people, and then I think her name is Shirley is the characters that shows up, and she like, I just like that they kind of band together. And then ultimately what is the guy's name that like runs it? Knox. Yeah. He ends up like for the betterment for the good of that area, kind of gives away Juliette's position and calls judicial and has them come and get her. And I think that like Juliette is very understanding in that moment, and that sacrificial play that she has there when she's like coming quietly. She looks at Walker. Walker says no, but she ultimately says, like, I'll make a deal with you, Bernard, here at the end, if it means that Mechanical and everybody stays safe. That was pretty emotional for me. Like, I felt like that family, that found family that she has, and like the sacrificial play that she was willing to make there, and just all of those characters and the interactions that go on with them. I'm like, these people truly care for each other, and they're up against it.
Good stuff.
And I like to see a scrappy band like that. And then to come all the way around to my point, Walker had some sort of relationship with someone in supply and was able to get the good heat tape there, which like they never would have seen coming. Judicial and all the other people never would have seen coming. And for her to actually have that used.
So, we're running out of time here in this episode, probably already past it, but here at the end, since we're not going to make a judgment about what was better, we're going to save that till next week when we finish out the book. I want to speculate a little bit. I want to like try and guess and like what could be going on with Juliette. Where is she gonna go? So we and this is a bit of a spoiler for the book, and maybe what it's book knowledge that might be a spoiler for the show. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So check out for the next like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But in the book, it is revealed that there's this Silo 18, and that's what this 18 means. That's what Bernard is. He's in conversation with another Silo, and I feel like Juliette is going to go to another Silo, whether or not it is 18 or another one, since knowledge we didn't have in the book is that this reveal of all these silos in this big like open area where it's like there seems to be dozens. It seems like she's going to go to another Silo. What is she going to find there? I don't know. I actually am really excited because this is again giving me Fallout vibes, and I'm like imagining her finding like another Silo where like, who knows what happened in this Silo? Is it a thriving community, or has something gone wrong here? Has there been a rebellion that had, like everybody got killed? Like there could be some really interesting stuff of her like exploring and finding other Silos and like ruins of them. That could be really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I have been speculating about this for a long time, just since I've watched the first season. And I feel like she's going to need to be in another safe facility fairly quickly based on
she's
limited
going into another
oxygen
Silo
in that
man.
suit. Got to be in another Silo. But I'm like, what does that look like? Does she walk up to their like just from, imagine the opposite thing happening at the Silo we've seen everything from. Somebody comes over the hill and walks up towards the camera, and then how does everybody react?
I'm going to go ahead and say I think it's an abandoned Silo, or not abandoned, but like like
overtaken, like you said, by rebels.
Or like
whatever.
people have died there, or maybe it's being run by like the survivors, but like they've overthrown their IT department, and like what does that even look like now? And I think she's going to get involved, and I'm going to make another prediction. I think she's going to come back into our original Silo through the hatch.
Through the door. Yeah. Liberator. She's going to come liberate our Silo of characters. Yeah. Well, we know that a lot of these characters are going to show up again, so I would think so. I would think that she's going to be out on some sort
Probably with more people, like you said. Maybe she's got some people with her.
She's going to go out and find something out there. She's going to find the secrets of the world, and these other. I think we're going to see a lot of what goes on with these other characters, which leads me to what I think will be in. Yeah, which leads me to what I think the rest of the book will be about. I think the rest of the book maybe from other people's POVs within the Silo. Yeah,
because I think he's going to be very important going forward.
We could have like Sims POV or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. Like we haven't gotten any of Sims in the book, I don't think. Or if he's there, he's not nearly as like, omnipresent as he is in the show. So man, I'm really excited to get into the next part of this book. And honestly, to see season 2. So this has been a lot of fun. Listener, viewer, if you're on YouTube, let us know in the comments if you're enjoying this. And if you're listening to it, let us know in the form of a rating and review. Mention this coverage in particular. It helps us get the word out and continue to build up our show.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. We're all over the place. All of those at Ink to Film.
And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. On there, you can comment suggestions in our master list, where we're going to be determining what our very next project is going to be after we finish out Silo. So if you want to get those suggestions in, if you want to be able to vote on those polls, you're going to want to join Patreon and watch all kinds of bonus content, etc., etc.
And thank you to Russ Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's going to be it for this week. Unsee what you just saw.
Yeah.
And until next time.
Keep adapting.